Alright boys, continuing the tier list, we have everybody's favorite class, the Assassin class, and I'm not gonna lie, this is gonna be a pretty easy one to go ahead and make because a lot of the Assassin class servants are kind of like niche servants. Like, they all kind of do one thing and they do it pretty well, although there are a couple of standout servants. But because the Assassin class has like a negative damage modifier, basically, it takes a lot for these servants to actually stand out as tier 1 servants. And yeah, I've read a lot of the comments, people are like, why tier 0 and why not tier 1? So I changed that to tier 1. So you gotta have people like Kama, right, that like are just so oppressively good that they really stand out as like a tier 1 option or as like a must summon type servant, because a lot of these guys, I'm just gonna, spoiler alert, kind of fall in that like tier 2 range. Like, a lot of them are just kind of like, oh yeah, they're just really decent, you can use them and you can kind of get some mild results from them, but really they're nothing super insane. So as per usual, I will drop the tier list in the pinned comments. If you'd like to make your own Assassin tier list, make sure you leave a like and subscribe on the channel or whatever if you'd like to see daily FGO content. And with all that being said, let's just start jumping right into this. And Carry over here is just a really good introduction for the Assassin class. I mean, the guy is just like decent enough, right? Like, he has the Pierce invincibility, he has the Pierce defense, so he can kind of get by everything, which in a way for me kind of makes him a baby Shiki, which I guess, spoiler alert, everybody knows Shiki's going to be going up here, because they kind of do that same thing. He's just missing like the actual survivability and the battery and the stuff that Shiki actually has that makes her kind of insane, but he's still got like the scapegoat skill, so that's technically survivability. He can try to make someone else take the fall for him, but really outside of that, there's not a whole lot else like insane stuff that's going on with him. You can use him and you can get some decent results, right? He's got a very high hit arts NP, so if you want to try to like drop a bunch of stars or something with that, you can try to do that meme, but really, aside from that, there's not a lot of insane stuff that he's really doing, as opposed to like some of the other guys up here. And unfortunately, if you have someone like Shiki, a lot of these options get invalidated. Now, thankfully, I guess for some players or for some of these servants, Shiki hasn't come back in a while, so some of these other servants can see some play, I suppose. But yeah, I don't think that's a really good thing, in all honesty, because, I want Shiki to come back so other players can actually have her, because she is so good. Anyway, moving on. Here's another servant that doesn't actually get that much like chatter about them, right? I don't understand why people don't talk about 100 personas. I'm almost tempted to just pull her up over here to just show you guys why she's so good. I mean, she gives herself like the Omni card buff. She gives herself really good NP gain. Like, the girl can like loop her NP like nobody's business. And like, sure, you might say like, oh, with her third skill is going to remove her own buffs. Just don't be a dummy, right? Don't be a dummy. Don't pop this when you got all of your like buffs popping off, and you'll be absolutely fine. Like, this girl is really, really insane. Every time she's NPing, which, like I mentioned earlier, she can really loop easily, especially because of this. And if she gets the arts buff, you're just going to be stacking massive amounts of damage and pretty much denying the enemy to ever crit you, right? Starting at like 50%, that's dummy insane, right? You could pretty much deny the enemy from ever critting you, because the reason this never feels super impactful is that a lot of servants will give like minus 20% or minus 30% to the enemy, and it's like, well, the enemy's like, okay, you might miss out on like one crit here or there, but she just starts stacking this down on them. Not only is she doing a lot of damage, and not only is she like looping her NP, but she's also pretty much protecting not only herself but the entire party. This is one of those servants that like I'm surprised not more people are using, because she's insanely good, right? If you don't have Shiki, she's kind of like your next go-to option. Although, and I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but we're kind of talking about the single target arts guys. Xiaomi's also going to be a very solid option once she starts getting her buffs. I think she's a little better than Carry right now. Like, I prefer her a little bit because of like the dodge and the battery and that kind of stuff that makes her unique. But eventually she's going to get some really strong special damage mods. And once she gets that, I think she'll kind of bump into like this higher end tiers, right? Where she'll be like a very valid option for people that don't have Shiki, because she'll kind of be the same thing. Shiki will still have like the advantage with like her being able to pierce stuff and everything, but Xiaomi will be able to do massive amounts of damage and still share like the battery and the survivability and all that good stuff. But I think this is kind of like the state for like your arts, single target assassins, right? This is kind of how I feel like these guys are kind of going right now. And so on that note, we'll move on to some of the other people. I just felt like it made sense to kind of talk about all of them together. In fact, actually, can I snipe some of the actual like bad servants out? Like, don't use Phantom of the Opera. You don't use Mata Hari. Is there anyone else I can like snipe out of here that's just like bad? I really don't want to do it to Okita, but like the fact that they put the stun on her NP, I mean, maybe I'm coping because all of her buffs are insane, right? Like she's got like huge quick damage. She can do really big damage on her NP. She's like she's just good, right? Like all of her buffs are massive, but the trade-off is that she stuns herself on NP. I don't know. I might be coping. I'm gonna put her in tier 3 just because I try to always force myself to use Okita, but really no avail. I don't know. Maybe I'm coping a little bit on that one, but I mean, yeah, you don't use Jekyll and Hyde. He's not very good. Like, Steno, I was going to, like, cope and be like, well, you could technically use her for her double charisma for divine people, but are you really breaking out Steno for that? No, not really. Jin K, when she gets her buff, will be fine, but right now, nah, she's pretty bad. I'm really coping on Okita, aren't I? But it's like her buffs are so strong. Like, what if Copium, we just didn't use her NP? What if we just used her face cards to do big crit damage, right? What if we just did that? I guess you could also say, like, well, I mean, you get all those really big buffs, and if you bring, like, a debuff cleanser or something along those lines, you can kind of make do with Okita, and if you get kind of lucky, you can also get away with not getting stuns on the NP. There's also that, not Mystic Code, but the command code that came out with Tamamo Cat's buff that was supposed to help her out with her own self-stun on her NP. If you have that, I guess you can give that to Okita and, like, have her attack first and get debuff immunity against stun. So I guess tier 3 is actually fine, I guess, because she's got really strong buffs and there's ways to get around her demerit. It's just you kind of have to be prepared for it, and you got to really prep heavily against it and maybe get a little bit lucky. But yeah, these other guys, poo-poo stinky right now. Kind of sucks for Matahari because, you know, her lore and everything is really cute. Fuma, I'm going to put him in tier 3. And I know I'm kind of just jumping around right now, but I'm kind of just selectively kind of go by tier. Fuma's going to go in tier 3 because, like, I was going to put him in don't, but he does have, like, decent niche in, like, being a debuff person and kind of, like, locking down the enemy, like, lowering all their stats and, like, hitting them with confusion and all the other things that he hits them with. I guess also, since he's, like, a 3-star, he's technically, like, a free NP5, so his damage is okay, I suppose. Really kind of reaching with him, but I feel like, at the very least, Fuma can do some damage and actually kind of has a niche, whereas like Matahari has like one effect skills that are like not very good. And Jekyll and Hyde will get a buff in the future that I think kind of can buff him up under that tier 3, where it actually kind of makes the whole switch off thing a little more viable. But I still think even on JP, he's like one buff off from being like really good and like being able to actually be run unironically. Jin K is also still missing her buff. So I guess, I don't know, maybe Fuma's like a little bit of copium putting him up there, but yeah. And speaking of kind of like the lower rare people, Serenity's kind of waiting for her buff as well. I think once she actually gets that, she'll be a bit more runnable. She'll be like kind of competitive in like these lower end tiers if you don't have some of the higher end art servants. She'll be getting like an arts buff. I believe it's during Grail Live. So once she gets that, that'll make her a bit better. But unfortunately right now it's kind of like toxic, you know, poison meme, which is not super great unless you're kind of, you know, LARPing around with some like poison setup. You know, maybe you're bringing Robin Hood or something crazy like that. But until we get something like that to make that a little bit more viable, or we get her buff, yeah, she's still kind of like, you would run her if you think she's really cute, but until she gets the buff, it's not super great. Shuten, now that she has her battery, I think she's actually a bit more runnable. It's still unfortunate. She kind of is in the same boat as Da Vinci, where they're both like pretty solid servants. It's just they have one hit AoE arts NPs, and that really hurts them from like fundamentally being a good art servant, right? Because you need numerous hits so you can get overkill. And unfortunately, Shuten can actually do a lot of damage. Like her damage is pretty high for an assassin. And so she could actually get that overkill if she had the hits, right? Because everything else that Shuten is doing as well on top of that would be amazing. Like the fact that she double buffs herself, her attack is so high, she's got the guts if you want to bring her to more difficult content, and you might want to do that because she hits the enemy with like 70,000 billion debuffs and has the ability to like AoE charm the enemy party. Like she can theoretically stun the entire enemy party, which is really insane. It's just like kind of unfortunate that they were like, yeah, one hit AoE arts NP. I'm like, dude, who made, like, I get she's an earlier servant, but like whose idea was that? Because even back in the day, fundamentally art servants and all these other guys still wanted that overkill to get that extra NP refund. And so who thought it was a good idea to be like, oh, to balance out the damage, we got to give her a one-hit NP? It's like, bro, at least give her 3. I'm really hoping that Lysangle fixes some of the W's mistakes and will retroactively change a lot of these older servants' hits, like on their NPs or on even just their base hits, right? I think that would be an insane buff that they could give some people. But unfortunately, Shuten, I think that does like dramatically hold her back from like actually being insanely good. Summer Skahawks, she's kind of like, I just view her as like free-to-play Okita in the way that like she can do really good damage because she's a free-to-play like free 5-star servant. But while you can use her for some like quick farming, she's not exactly ideal for doing so. It's kind of like you want to just find anybody else to do the job, but she's kind of fine, I guess, if you don't have... Oh, where is she? Where is Ushi? Because I guess this is the perfect time to talk about her. Yeah, if you don't have like Ushi, I guess she can kind of get the job done, but I'm laughing while saying that because it's like, it's a little bit iffy on that one. So speaking of Ushi, Ushi's just kind of like your best go-to like AoE quick looping person. I know she can struggle a little bit when looping, right? But she's kind of like your only option, and you can kind of force her into doing it. She's still got good things going for her, and she does have an NP boost that is going to be coming that gives her like lawful special damage mod, and it like gives her even more damage because it's an NP buff, and that's definitely going to help her out a lot. I believe she has like a cumulative like 41% quick card buff because of like her 30% buff and like her 11% passive. She's got dodges and stuff built into her. She's got like an insane 40% battery. So it's like Ushi can still like kind of get the job done. She's got like a pretty solid kit. I'd maybe like to see like one more buff thrown her way, but like especially for an assassin, like she's fine enough. Like she's good enough. All right, I know I'm probably gonna get some hate for this, but I'm putting Cleo in tier 2. Okay, and here's the reason. I love Cleo as much as the next guy, right? I got NP2 Cleo, and I've used her for a lot of boss fights. The problem, though, is that Cleo, there are 2 different versions of Cleopatra. There is Cleopatra with Imperial Privilege, and there's Cleopatra without Imperial Privilege. They are 2 completely separate servants because that attack, and especially the attack, but also the defensive buff, just makes Cleo hit so much harder, and it makes her such a tanky servant that they're basically like 2 different people during those 3 turns, right? And so if I'm thinking about Cleopatra with Imperial Privilege, I'm thinking she's like a high 1.5 like servant, maybe even cracking into tier 1, right? I think she's really insane. But when I think about Cleopatra without the Imperial Privilege, I'm like, this servant's kind of dog water. I don't know if she's quite like tier 3 dog water, but like not super great. And because she has that RNG, I really am like, man, I want to put her at like high tier 2 just because she has that potential to really let you down. And it's not like other servants where it's like, oh, there's a little bit of RNG here, or like, oh, they have a special damage mod that's for their niche. It's like, no, if you don't get that Imperial Privilege, the servant is just dog water. Like they are going to struggle a lot. And so I think like high-end tier 2 is like a good spot for Cleo because it's like, oh, if you get the skill, she's going to look really insane. But if you don't, she's going to be hanging out around here. So that's where she's going to be going. Hassan. I think Hassan's actually really good. I think he's very, very solid. He's one of like your few survivability. Actually, yeah, since we're kind of talking about survivability servants, Osaka Behemoth can also go up here. Both of these two have a really strong niche of being like solo servants. Hassan is very tanky. He can do some pretty decent damage. If you're fighting up against normal, like basically non-servant or non-boss enemies that are around in the quest that you're bringing him to, he can insta-kill them either from his passive or with the NP, like plus the 3rd skill. They recently gave him a buff that I think helped him out a lot as well. The gut skill that they gave him, or like if he dies, he's able to get like a buster buff and a battery and all that good stuff. That's definitely helped him out a bit as well, because you probably will get that at some point when you're doing a solo with him. But he's also one of those servants that you can still bring with support, and it also helps him out a bit, right? If you want to bring him with double Koyanskaya, they'll flood him with stars and extra damage, some crit damage, all that good stuff, batteries that he's going to like, that also reduces cooldown. So Hassan is one of those like really good solo servants that like works with or without supports. So that's always really good. And his kit is just like fundamentally really solid, and he does a lot of damage, right? Like his damage is really strong as well. So that definitely helps him out, especially when compared to some of the other assassins that might struggle to actually do damage. Osaka Behemoth, on the other hand, is kind of like a stall solo servant, but is also kind of like baby Scotty for the assassin class. So she's kind of got that going on for her. But then, I don't know, even it's kind of funny that they released Ruler Scotty, who's kind of like a pseudo quick and buster support, because it makes the baby Scotty thing for Osaka Behime even funnier, because now she kind of doubles up on being a quick and a buster support at the same time. So that is kind of funny. That I think that actually holds more water. It's like, oh, she's like a baby Scotty, like literally. So I think she's pretty solid on that. I think Yanqing is actually pretty decent. Like, I think the fact that you can just kind of get into a loop of, like, genning a lot of stars, doing some pretty good crit damage, just makes him, like, a really solid, like, single-target quick servant if you want to bring him. Kind of on the other end of the spectrum would be, like, Wu Zetian, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. They're kind of, like, I kind of view them in the very similar light, you know, Wu and Yanqing, where they're just, like, really solid options for your quick teams, depending on what you need. Almost caught up something else. Yanqing is just a very solid option as like your single target, whereas like Wu is offering a little bit of team utility, right? The fact that she's like lowering enemy defense is kind of providing more damage for the party. She's also got that charisma that gives the quick buff as well. So like Wu's got a little bit of that like team utility going into it, whereas Yanqing may be a little more selfish as he's doing his damage and everything, but he's also, and I know they're all assassins, so they're all like pretty decent at star genning at the very least, but he's really good at star genning, so he's technically always going to make sure that your party is flooded in stars as well. So I think they're both very, very solid. Summer Nito, okay. So Summer Nito, I actually don't think she's as bad as people like to claim that she is. I think she's actually a usable servant. She kind of has the Eris problem, where like you can use her as a looper because her natural NP gain is very high. She's got like a really insane third skill that's giving her attack, NP gain, and NP damage. As an AoE art servant with 3 hits, I believe it's what's on her NP, she can actually loot pretty well. It's just you don't want to get that 30% chance to insta-kill people. Thankfully, though, she doesn't buff her chance to insta-kill people, so you just got to get a little bit lucky, and you can use her as a looper. But even if you want to use her in, like, challenge quests, she's kind of got, like, some, you know, gimmicks that can be used over there with her having the taunt, and her being able to like give herself extra defense. She has like small debuff resistance that can maybe help her out in some corner cases. So I think she's decent enough. Like I think she kind of has like a role to play in certain setups. Same thing for like Danzo. Danzo's like really good as kind of like a support DPS if you want to bring her. Her ability to just give anybody a dodge and an invincibility on 2 separate skills is good. She gives the party a buster buff, which is nice, and she has an anti-demonic overcharge on her NP that can be very helpful. So I think she's a bit better than people give her credit for. Also on that dodge and that invincibility, she's giving them crit star generation rate as well, which can be very nice. It's just Danzo doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but then again, not a lot of assassins are doing a lot of damage anyway, because as I mentioned towards the beginning of the video, a lot of assassins are just severely hindered by the fact that their class modifier is really, really low, right? So I don't really hold that too much against her as I would like other classes. And I think that, you know, maybe if they give Danzo like 1 to 2 more support buffs, she could actually be one of those servants that bumps up a little bit, because she's already got an interesting thing going with her being able to give the party the buster buff, give them the crit star gen, and then 2 forms of survivability is very, very nice. Semiramis is one of those servants that like, again, you guys can tell that like the assassin class is not one that I think super highly of, because a lot of their servants are just kind of like seemingly underwhelming at times. But Semiramis is one of those servants that I'm kind of like, I don't know, like I almost want to put her in tier 1 because she's doing a lot of like really good stuff, right? The double classing she has going for herself is very interesting. The 30% battery can definitely help her out, and especially if you want to use her for buster farming when Koyenskaya comes out. The fact that she can like nuke the entire enemy's buster resistance is not only good for her damage, but it's also really good if you have any other servants that are also going to be doing, or other servants that are going to be doing damage, like Koyenskaya, because that's going to help out Koyenskaya's NP damage as well. It's just the only thing that I don't like about it too much is that you only really get to use it for that wave. So like it's better if you're fighting a boss, because then you get the maximum value out of that, because then you just get to slam that boss repeatedly, as opposed to you losing that buster resistance after you've, you know, moved on from the wave, right? But I think Semiramis is actually really good. I think she's very solid. I just think some of the little annoyances, things like, you know, the fact that it's buster resistance down, while it is interesting, can be a little annoying. And so I think that holds it back just a tad. All right, now we have some of the legends. We got Regend and we got Yugioh. I actually think these servants are not overhyped. I actually think they're very, very strong, especially considering that, well, in Kojiro's case, he's a free servant. I mean, the guy's like doing everything. He's stacking a lot of damage. He's got good survivability. He can gen the stars. He's stacking buffs on his NP. His NP actually does decent damage as a free 1-star servant, right? Like, the guy is just really, really solid. And it's like one of those guys like Arash that I feel like everybody should have leveled in their box, right? Because Kojiro, especially if you're just starting out, is very, very strong. Like, he's like one of the few exceptions I feel that when you look at the assassin class, the dude is just one of those guys that stands out because he just does everything, and he does everything super well. And Yugioh's kind of on the other end of that spectrum. Yugioh, for me, even though, you know, I've had a really hard time pulling him and I accidentally burnt one of my copies and I'm only sitting at NP3 with him, you know, is a guy that even at NP1 that I, you know, was stuck with for a while over on the JP version of the game, still puts in a lot of work. A lot of his damage mods are pretty much his primary forms of damage. So even though you could say like, oh, well, doesn't Yugioh only have a lot of 1-turn buffs? It's like, well, not really, because Yugioh doesn't really get any like main forms of damage, like an attack buff that only lasts 1 turn, an NP damage buff that only lasts 1 turn, stuff like that. He has special damage mods that just last the turn. And so even if you're not getting those, his damage is going to remain rather consistent. And he's kind of like the arts form of Kojiro, except where Kojiro is like stacking and building up. Yugioh over here is just like smacking enemy servants for just a billion damage on really low cooldowns, right? So I think they're both very insanely good. And even though it's hard for me to say like, oh yeah, I would, you know, consider Yugioh as an NP5 for like this list, because he's a limited 3-star servant. Even if you're looking at him at NP1, I've had very good mileage with this servant when I had him only at NP1 over on JP. So I think he's a very, very strong servant. I guess another, well, let's just get another shoe in here. Like Kama is stupid insane. Like, I think probably if I'm thinking about it, I think she's the best assassin we have. I think the only person that can maybe give her a run for a money is MHX. Sorry, I couldn't pronounce money over there for a second. But like, they're both really insanely good. Kama definitely probably beats MHX out though, with the fact that she's got a 50% battery. She almost like guaranteed charms on her NP when you pop that 3rd skill. Her damage is really good. She has like guts that doesn't like leave on cooldown. Like, it just remains until you use it. She has an alter ego pretty much niche in being able to kill them, which is insanely good, right? Because if you don't have anybody to take care of alter egos, Kama will just mop them up. You can bring her to fights like type neutral and she'll perform really well. She's just got a very, very strong kit. Whereas MHX had one of the worst kits in the game and they buffed literally everything about her, and now she's dummy insane, right? She'll drop all the stars for you. She'll destroy all the sabers. She'll keep herself alive. Like, she's just generally really good, right? She then like probably like one of the advertisements for like one of the best glow up sabers in the entire game, right? Like, it's like we talked about like some of the better like lower rarity options. These are like the queens of like your higher rarity single target assassins. Like, they make the classic pretty good. Conversely, I think Jack is just a little behind on them. She's really known for like her insane quick cards and her special damage mod against female people, which is very, very strong. But in the modern era, Jack is going to need a little bit more, right? Like, she's got the basics down. Like, she's got survivability. She's got a big quick mana burst, albeit for 1 turn. She has a heal that could be transformed into something like pretty nice. And then the special damage mod and the insane quick cards that she has are kind of like the basis for like what other quick cards should look like, right? But she's going to need something. And I'm surprised they haven't thrown Jack a buff, because she's just like one of those servants that has like always been really good, like always been pretty solid, because she does one thing and she does it really, really well. But then she has the added bonus of just fundamentally being really strong because of how good her quick cards are. So I don't know if it's like a Gilgamesh thing where they think she's like fundamentally too good that like giving her a buff is going to make her too broken. But then again, Lasengel did just throw a buff Gilgamesh's way, so we might see something for Jack in the near future. But yeah, I think she's definitely really strong, just not quite up to like that tier 1 standard of like, ooh, you should really level up, or you should probably go get these servants if you're lacking in something. Although I think there's a little bit of a drop off between like Musum and Kama, and then like, yeah, Hassan is like pretty strong, but I don't think you need him in the account, but he's a strong addition. I think there's a little bit of a drop off there. Okay, so I don't know what the like upsettedness is about you. I just don't know if people don't know how to use her. So let me just spell this out on her 2nd skill over here. Where is you at? Let's spell this out. Yes. Does she remove all of her stuff? Yeah. But do you know what they gave her? This. That. What's up, man? What's the deal? Does she do a lot of damage? Not really. She's at like, what, 16,000 damage? But not a lot of assassins are doing a lot of damage anyway. But like, look at some of the other insane stuff she's doing. She literally gives herself NP all the time. Like, this is always up. She's always just getting passive 10% NP. That's just how this should read. It's for 5 turns out of 5 turn cooldown. And then she's got an on-demand battery. Like, Yu is fine, okay? She's fine enough. Like, is her damage insane? No. But like, everybody likes to just, I don't know, hate on this servant for whatever reason, because they're like, dog. She removes her buffs. It is like, yeah, that's why she has the buff removal resistance. And you can actually almost thank the fact that she has this, because since they buffed this to being 3 turns, it just makes her better in more modern fights, because all bosses nowadays, like when you break their bars, love to just yeet your buffs off of you, and it's super annoying. But because she had this, and they wanted to fix her removing her own buffs, they gave her a 100% buff removal resistance for 3 turns, and it retroactively has made her better against more modern bosses. So like, Yu is not bad. Consider taking her out for a spin. She's not that bad. All right, like, come on, like, let's stop the cap, okay? Let's stop capping, all right? Lee is a very hard one for me to rank, because Lee is one of those servants that you guys know I don't like my burst damage servants. Like, I don't like the servants that are only good for like 1 turn and then they fall off. But I think because of like how the assassin class is, and like how a lot of these assassins are just kind of like you see like a lot of these guys, they're just like this is probably the most don't servants we've had in quite a bit. And like a lot of them are kind of hanging in this bottom area, that I kind of maybe now see why people really like Lee, because comparatively, he's really strong, right? Like, he's very strong when you look at like a lot of the other assassin people that are here, right? And so I'm starting to get like, oh, that's why people really rate Lee pretty high, because this guy can do like a lot of burst damage, and he can actually do damage as an assassin. Plus, he's got like Pierce Invul and can loop his NP with the insane crits on top of all of that. So I'm like, I kind of get it now. Kind of understand why people are rating this guy super high. I'm not going to live it down that like his NP buff when they gave that to him literally did nothing. They couldn't throw anything his way. I think that's still very hilarious, but I definitely get now why a lot of people rate this guy pretty high. So yeah, throwing him up there. I'm going to move you down with the other free-to-play guys over there. You guys can hang out over there. Gray. So Gray I think is really good for free-to-play people. I think as like a free-to-play option, she's pretty solid, but I think she's held back by, I don't know. I'm trying to think, how would I word it? Because like, I believe it's a 20%. Let me actually, before somebody flames me in the comment, let me make sure it's 20%. Because I think that was like one of my main issues with Gray, because I think that's good. And then she has the Pierce Invul. Where is it? She has it somewhere. I don't know if we have that yet, but like I know she gets that in the future. Where was it? Yeah, it was a 20% battery. There we go. Yeah, that was my issue, because I was like, ooh, we could actually use this servant as like a buster farm, and she's gonna be really insane free NP5, and then it was like 30%, and I kind of took issue with that. And then yeah, we got the 1-turn buffs. Although I guess this was supposed to retroactively fix Gray. Let me actually just double check. Let me make sure I'm not being a big dummy. Okay, it comes back with the rerun, and we have not gotten the rerun, I don't believe. So yeah, once she gets that, I think I'll favor Gray a little bit more, because then it's like, boom, we get the like invincibility buff we're getting our like NP that we're missing. But right now it's like, yeah, I'm not super high on Gray. Although I guess she could still do really strong damage. Like, she's a free NP5. Now that I'm looking at it, and I'm kind of considering it, I might bump her actually up, yeah. So I was like, actually, yeah, I'm like, even still, even though like she won't have like the niche of being able to like do buster farming and stuff like that, I still think what she's bringing to the table, even without this, right, I think that's still fine, because that's still going to contribute good damage for the rest of, like, not only her, but for the party as well, because it's for 3 turns. Right, that's pretty good. Yeah, she's got a little bit of an awkward kit, because she's got like the triple quick deck, but she's supposed to be a buster servant. I think it's fine though, because I kind of see that they're like, yeah, they wanted to be like a Starge, and they really wanted to take advantage of the assassin class. I think I'm actually fine with her being up there. Yeah. She does have the weird debuff resistance. I don't know what their thing is with 30% debuff resistance. But yeah, I've convinced myself. I'm like, yeah, no, I think she's pretty sturdy. I think once she gets the buff, she'll just be like higher into the tier 1.5. But I think she's actually solid. Yeah, because I'm also thinking, like, she is a free NP5, which means she's, like, one of the few assassins that's going to be doing, like, mad damage. Where's she at? Where's NP5? Yeah, 35k is not bad. For, like, an AoE, yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad. Well, then again, I believe this is with her buff on JP. So this should be a little bit less on the NA version of the game, because I believe this is calculating the NP buff that she's actually going to get. But still, even if it's around, like, 30, 29k, that's still not bad. That's still fine. Corday. I think Corday is pretty great. I think there's a little bit of RNG to Corday. Like, you really want to get that NP damage buff, that 50% NP damage buff on the RNG, but she's still fine. Like, the double dodge, still really strong. She's still a free NP5. She's just kind of, I feel like she kind of just competes with, like, a lot of the other single target arts guys. I don't know why I didn't bring her up with some of the others, but she's solid. I don't think people should be sleeping on Corday. I think you should be leveling her up. Definitely strong. Hassan, I'm also pretty high on. I think you could actually get away with using this guy. I think it's just that Kojiro's like 1 star lower than him and is like infinitely better is kind of what hurts him. But Hassan's got like the triple dodge. He's got on-star demand. He could do some crits. He's a really good star gen if you want to use him for that. He's definitely very solid if you want to use him early on. And I guess the only reason that I really kind of came around to him is that I used both of these guys early on. I kind of would like pivot off of them because I'd be like, oh, I'm using Kojiro too much. Let me start using Hassan so I wouldn't get bored. And this guy's actually pretty solid. This guy's actually pretty decent. My man is actually pretty good. I actually literally just forgot his name, but Sanson, that's his name. There we go. He's got the human mod, which I know is kind of one of those things that is like a meme in the community. It's still fine if he's fighting like guys, but it doesn't apply to servants. But at least he has the anti-evil special damage mod. And he also has like kind of a niche in being able to help out his supports, right? With being able to give them heals and remove debuffs on them. That can always be really good. Like, let's say you're doing some setup where, I don't know, you're using like Merlin, double Merlin Sanson, and your Merlin gets, I don't know, charmed or something. He can remove that debuff off of Merlin. I think Sanson's definitely pretty good. Like, the evil special damage mod, I think, kind of balances things out for him a little bit, with the human mod not being so great. But I think it kind of, you know, helps him out and gives him somewhat of a niche. And then same thing for Carmilla. You know, Carmilla in a way is almost like worse Jack for me. They both kind of operate the same niche of being anti-female assassins, although Jack is quick and she is Buster, and I think Jack being quick benefits a lot more, especially with those really OP quick cards. It allows her to just loop her NP like a madman, whereas Carmilla is just like, you use her if you don't have Jack, basically. It's kind of how I would review Carmilla, but yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at the assassins over here. I think that's pretty solid. I think some of the only things that might be cope is like maybe like Kotaro being this high. Maybe I'm like investing too much into his ability to kind of be a debuffer, but I think with him at least having something to do is better than a lot of these guys right now. At least like Serenity and Jin-K will get better over time. So what, like these three right here, they'll get better once they get their buffs. These three are kind of just been left in the dust and are going to need a little bit more. Maybe there's some copium up here. Like, I could maybe be convinced to maybe bump like him, and like maybe like some of these guys down. Like, I think like these are pretty solidly up here. And I think some of these guys, you could maybe convince me that they're just like high 1.5. Maybe they're not quite this high. But maybe it's also that I just have a very low expectancy for assassin class servants, and so maybe I'm just like, well, no, these guys are just like really insane as assassins, so I'm gonna let them cook up there in tier 1. So y'all can let me know, but we'll definitely be getting some really insane assassins in the future, right? With Koyenskaya coming out, the Valkyrie assassins are really good. Huyan is really insane, and then Kichi is a very strong free-to-play servant. So I don't know, maybe they realized kind of around, like they realized they gave us Okita and then never any other assassins for a fat minute. They were like, you know what, we should probably do them right and give them actual good assassins. So the next upcoming assassins are pretty good. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. As per usual, the tier list will be in the pinned comments, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace, late guys.